welcome everyone to our National Coding Week event. This is our first online event of this academic year, which is very exciting. So hopefully you'll enjoy it, hopefully you'll be inspired, and it'll get you thinking about some careers in technology that you might not have otherwise considered. Hopefully it's going to let me go to the next slide. Here we go. So agenda for today. Firstly, I'm just going to very quickly introduce Next Tech Girls. So we're the organisation that's organised this event, who I work for. I'll introduce myself in a second as well. I often forget to do that. I've then got a short tech careers quiz, which is just 5 questions, and it's just to kind of get your brains working, get you thinking a little bit. We'll have a Q&A with women in tech. Some of you might have seen the slide deck that I shared a couple of days ago. So we have 5 women all working in kind of slightly different roles, but all using coding day to day in their jobs. So again, hopefully we'll give you an idea of some of the different jobs in technology that you might not have considered before. And then finally, we've got a unplugged maze debugging. So unplugged, it just means it's coding on paper, not using a computer. I know some of you might be on individual computers, but lots of you are in classrooms. So it's a way to give you a bit of a taste of some elements of coding without you needing to be on a computer. And the maze debugging part I will explain later, so don't worry about that. You might have done something similar before, but hopefully you'll enjoy it. So Next Tech Girls, who are we? Who am I? I'm Emily. I'm the director of Next Tech Girls. We are a social enterprise. You might not have heard that phrase before. It effectively means that we are not about making money. We're about making positive change in society. So in our specific case, our mission is to close the digital skills gap and the gender gap in particular in the tech industry. So at the moment, there aren't enough people with technical skills. So there are loads and loads of jobs. This is one of the questions in the quiz, I think, so I won't tell you how many, but there are lots and lots of jobs available in the tech industry, and there aren't enough people with the skills to do them. That's one issue. And then the second one is that women are very underrepresented in the tech industry at the moment. Again, I'm not going to tell you how many women there are because that's one of the questions. But there's not as many women as there should be if we want the tech industry to reflect society, which we think is really important because, we all use technology all the time, and for it to be easy for us to use and safe for us to use, and to kind of meet our needs, it's really important that we all feel represented by the people that are designing and building and fixing that technology. I slightly introduced myself there, so I run Next Tech Girls. I consider myself a former woman in tech. So I worked for the Ministry of Justice for several years in the digital and technology space, mostly as a delivery manager, which is probably a job that you haven't heard of before. I hadn't until I did it. I was effectively like a team coach. So my job was to make sure that everyone in the team who was working on a specific website or online service had the tools that they needed to do their job, had the skills that they needed to do their job, were working well together, were able to kind of communicate well and get on with each other. And if there was anything that was kind of getting in the way of them delivering what they needed to deliver, it was my job to fix that. So it might be going to speak to another team, might be speaking to a senior person, it might be hiring an extra person with skills that we were missing. And a lot of what I did was running fun workshops to help everyone to get to know each other better and to kind of reflect on how we'd been working and how we could do better. So it was a very enjoyable job, very kind of people focused. I didn't really need to have any technical knowledge or skills. I didn't need to be able to code, which I think is quite surprising to lots of people. And that's one of my points on my next slide. So here are some facts about working in tech that we really want you all to know. So first one, you don't have to be interested or good at coding. You don't even need to be able to code to work in the tech industry. Now, today's event, because it's National Coding Week, we are focusing a little bit more on coding. So as I mentioned, all the women on the panel do use coding in their jobs in some way. However, they are actually in the minority. So the vast majority of jobs in the tech industry don't actually require any coding skills. So if you've never tried coding, give it a try. If you've tried, but you've only maybe tried one language, remember that there are lots of different languages, and some people really don't get on with some and really, really love others. So it's worth trying a few different ones. However, if you've done that and you really don't like it, or you just really think you're not good at it, don't rule out working in tech. There are loads and loads of other ways that you could get involved, and it's such an exciting industry to be in. Second point is that whatever your passion, you can pursue it through tech. So because of the way the world works now, every industry will have technology teams, technology jobs. You know, most companies will have a website, and lots of companies will use technology, will use data. That's a role that we'll come across later, to help them perform better, basically, and make more money if that's what they're trying to do, sell more products, help more people if that's the business that they're in. So if you love music or film, or you're really interested in health or climate change or fashion, whatever it is, if you do have some tech skills or some interest in tech, then that's a great foot in the door to one of those really cool industries, one of those companies that you maybe would love to work for. You'll be highly employable if you do have some tech skills, and you can get in that way. Thirdly, you can earn a lot of money working in the tech industry. So this will be one of the questions later, but I mentioned there are lots and lots of jobs available for people in the tech industry, and there aren't enough people at the moment that can fill those jobs. So that means that companies are willing to pay lots more money to try to get that person, because they're kind of in competition with each other at the moment, which is great for you, because it means that when you're coming to apply for jobs in however many years' time, you'll be able to get very good salaries. Next one is that you can make a difference. So ultimately, what the tech industry is all about, solving problems. It's about making people's lives easier. Even if it is a kind of commercial company that's selling products, their tech team will be making sure that the website or the app works really smoothly, that people can very easily get where they need to get to, can very easily buy whatever product it is that they're selling. They want to make sure that people have the easiest and the most enjoyable experience of their technology. Obviously, on a bigger scale, there'll be people working in health tech who are actually trying to solve big health problems, like maybe cure diseases using technology. There are people in the climate area who are looking to, you know, use technology to fix some areas of climate change, and do things that are good for the environment. So working in tech is very much about problem solving and making people's lives easier, which is really great. You could work abroad or travel while working. So it's very common now, especially, it always has been quite common in the tech industry, but post-COVID, if we can call it that, it's even more common now for jobs to be advertised as hybrid or remote. So hybrid normally means that you will go into the office sometimes, and the rest of the time you can work from home or wherever you want, really. And remote means that you don't really ever go into the office. They might very occasionally invite you in for like a big team get together or something, but there's no expectation that you would need to go into the office. So you don't even need to be based in the same country often. So I know lots of people, lots of women who work in tech, who work in a different country to their company, or even travel around actually while they're working, which is pretty cool. You might have heard of digital nomads. There's lots of people sharing content about that on Instagram and TikTok, and that's very much within the tech industry. Finally, there are lots of different routes into the tech industry. I don't know actually the routes that all the women on the panel today took, but often when we run these events, they have taken different routes in, and some of them might surprise you. So the kind of classic route into tech is not the only option, is all I'm going to say, because again, that kind of comes up in the quiz. And one more thing that I just wanted to mention. So at Next Tech Girls, we've got two kind of main areas of work. One is online events like this, which we stream into multiple schools, and we do at least one a month. The other is work experience, and that's actually what we've been doing for longer. So if you have got a week of work experience, or however long it is, coming up, or if you'd like to do something in your summer holidays, as long as you're 14 or older, you can apply to do work experience with us. If you could just go to nexttechgirls.com, or on any of our social media, there'll be a link that will have the application form. And we try to place everyone who applies. Obviously, it depends how many applications we get, but we've placed lots so far this year. And we work with some very cool companies, some that are obviously tech, so like Sky, for example, or Google, and then others that you might never have heard of that are maybe much smaller companies, but wherever you do the work experience, we always get really positive feedback from students saying how much they enjoyed it, how much they learned, and how kind of exciting and inspiring it was. So we'll definitely recommend it, whether you're interested in tech careers or not. It's a really great way to get some experience working for an interesting and exciting company, and help you figure out if that's something that you might like to do or not. So something to consider. Okay, tech careers quiz. It's up to you how you do this. If your teachers are happy for you to do this, you could maybe just shout out what you think the answer might be. If they don't want you to do that, maybe just think of it in your head, or if hopefully you've got paper and pens or pencils, so you could write down what you think your answers are. I'm not going to be checking the answers. I don't think your teachers will check the answers either, but it's just for you to kind of get a feel for some different things about the tech industry that you might not have known before. Like I said, I think there's only 5 questions, so it'll be quite quick. And I think they're mostly like true or false or multiple choice. So they're not really hard. It's more about making you aware of some different things. So first question, true or false? You need a computer science degree to work in the tech industry. This actually, a question on this came up in the pre-event survey, which I meant to say thank you very much to everyone who filled that in, and we'll do our best to answer all the questions that were given to us through that. So question number 1, true or false? You need a computer science degree to work in the tech industry. Have a think about it. What do you think the answer is? And I'll come back and share the answers once we've done all 5 questions. Question 2, around what percentage of the tech industry are women? I've kind of helped you a bit here. One of them, it's probably not, because I said that women are underrepresented in the tech industry, which means there's not as many women in tech as there are in the world or in the country. But I didn't tell you exactly how many there were. So have a think about what you think it might be. Is it A, 10%, B, 25%, or C, 50%? Question 3. What is the average starting salary for a software engineer? So starting salary means your first job that you've ever done as a software engineer. So you might be fresh out of university. You might have been doing something totally different, working in a completely different industry, not in tech at all. Maybe you've taught yourself to code and now you're moving into being a software engineer. So it's your first job as a software engineer. What's the average starting salary that you would get? Is it A, £20,000? This is for the year. Is it B, £35,000? Is it C, £45,000? What do you think it might be? We're going through this fairly quickly. So number 4, how many tech job vacancies were there in the UK in 2021? I need to try and find a more recent stat for this, I think, but this is the most recent one I've been able to find. So this is how many jobs were available being advertised where companies were saying we need someone to apply to do this job. And I mentioned that there are lots of them and that there aren't enough people to do them because there aren't enough people with the skills that are needed. So is it A, 100,000, B, 1 million, or C, 2 million? How many jobs do you think there were? And then last question, number 5. When was this is a bit more specific, but I think it's very interesting. When was the first crash test dummy based on a woman developed? So when crash test dummies, like the sort of mannequin things that they put into cars to make sure that they're safe, basically, to kind of like crash test the car and see what happens to the dummy. When they were first developed in, I think, the 50s, they were based on the average size and proportions of a man. And then at some point since then, between then and now, one has been developed that is based on a woman. When did that happen? So A, 1977, B, 2005, C, 2022. What do you think? And now I'm going to share the answers. So I said it would be quite quick, but it's just to get you thinking about some things. So question 1, true or false? I kind of gave this one away a little bit before, but there you go. Good test of whether you were listening. You need a computer science degree to work in the tech industry. The answer is false. You do not need a computer science degree to work in the tech industry. That is one way to get the knowledge and skills to help you get started, but there are lots of different ways. And I would say that most jobs in the tech industry now don't require a degree at all, actually. They've realised that by saying you have to have a degree, they were limiting the number of people that could apply for those jobs. So lots of people that, for various different reasons, haven't got a degree or don't get a degree, and they didn't want them to be ruled out, because not having a degree doesn't mean that you're not intelligent, that you don't have the skills and the knowledge necessary to do the job really well. So yes, hopefully that's helpful information, and we'll speak to the panel in a little bit and hear about what their routes were, what they did when they left school, and if they don't mention them, I will mention some other routes in as well. Number 2, of the tech industry are women, so hopefully you'll realise that it's not 50%, which is what we would hope it would be. I think the world is actually 50, and the UK are 51% women, so we're actually slightly above half. But the answer is around 25%. I think the last stats that were released from last year were 26%, but close enough. About 1 in every 4 people in the tech industry are women. Which, as I said, if we want the people working on tech to reflect the people using it, then that's not enough. We need there to be more women to make sure that everything that they're building and working on works well for women and is safe for women to use. Okay, what is the average starting salary for a software engineer? You might be surprised by this one, but it's 45,000. I don't know if many of you kind of know what that means. I know when I was young, I didn't really know, like money didn't really mean much to me. But that is a very, very good starting salary. That's about twice the average salary in general of a working person in the UK at any level in their career, at any like number of years into working. So that's a very, very good starting salary. I think in general, starting salaries in the tech industry are, I think, 60-something% higher than any other industry. So it is definitely a good place to go if you're keen to earn lots of money, which probably lots of you are. Number 4, how many tech job vacancies were there in the UK in 2021? 2 million, so it's the biggest one. I might have given that away as well because I kept saying that there were lots of them. But yeah, 2 million job vacancies. That's a lot of job vacancies. So the good thing about applying to work in tech is that there will definitely always be jobs available. And then this says 4, but it should say 5. The final question was, when was the first crash test dummy based on women developed? 2022, November 2022, actually, so less than a year ago. This is a bit scary, really. So less than a year ago, the first ever crash test dummy based on a woman was developed, which means that for the previous 70-ish years, cars were only being tested with crash test dummies based on men, which means that lots of studies have shown, lots of data shows that cars are much safer for men than they are for women. The law still says that cars only have to be tested with the male crash test dummy. So although a woman-related one exists, car manufacturing companies don't have to use it yet. So we're hoping to get to a point where they do have to, or they choose to, and then they start building up that data to help them make sure that cars are just as safe for women as they are for men. So this is a really good example of where not having women involved in an industry can mean that the products and services that they develop and deliver potentially actually aren't safe for women. So it's not just that they don't work that well for women or they're not as exciting to women, it's that they're actually unsafe. So very important that we get more women involved to make sure that that stops happening. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because hopefully that's worked. We're going to move on now to the Q&A. So we should hopefully have 5 women on the call who I'm going to ask to now put their video on. And maybe turn their mics off, or you can leave it, turn their mics on, I meant to say. You can leave it off just for now, and then as we start talking, put it on if you prefer. Thank you, and I'm just going to spotlight you all now to make sure that everyone can see you. If I can, hopefully I can. Sorry, give me a second. This is, Teams is not my favourite thing in the world, but we'll get there. Here we go. I think I've almost done it. And do you know what? I'll spotlight me as well. Why not? Okay, so firstly, welcome. Thank you so much. It's great to have all 5 of you here. This is really nice. I'm always worried with events like this that someone will not be able to come at the last minute or something. So really great to have you all here. If we can just start going around, I'll kind of tell you who can go next. But if you could just introduce yourselves, what your job is and the company that you work for, just to start with. So Dara, can we start with you?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. And thank you, Emily, for this opportunity. My name is Dara, like she said, and I'm a software engineer at Spotify. And I've been there for just about a year now.
Nice. And in a minute, we'll ask you questions about what you're doing before that, but we'll go on to the next person. So Adelaide.
Morning, everyone. So I'm Adelaide, or Addy, whichever you prefer. I can't remember what the questions were already. Was it just
just your job title and your company for now?
Thank you. So QA automation engineer and Currencycloud, which is a little child company of Visa, some Visa cards.
Great. And for anyone who doesn't know, QA is
quality assurance.
Thank you. Helen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Helen. I'm a senior data scientist at Co-op. So Co-op headquarters of, you probably know Co-op from all the retail stores that we have, and also a few other industries are involved with, but headquarters is in Manchester.
Perfect, thank you. Penny?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Penny. I am an embedded software engineer, so I'm sure we'll get onto what that means. But I work for a company called IoT 747, so it's a small startup in Cambridge.
Perfect. And last but not least, the other Emily.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily. I work for Natwest or RBS Group, and I am a DevOps engineer working in the cloud.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, my next question for all of you is, because this has come up and it was asked in the pre-event survey, is what was your route into tech? So kind of what did you do after school and how did you actually end up working in your current roles? And we'll start with Penny.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm one of those that didn't sort of take that linear journey into tech. So I did go to university, but I studied biochemistry. So a little bit different. And then I got a job working in sales and marketing in the pharma industry. I did that for a couple of months, and then I wanted a bit more of a challenge, and I could sort of see as you work your way up, you know, it was sort of linear career paths. So I applied to do a master's in computer science, and I did that alongside working. And then after that, I transitioned into the biotech industry. So as a software engineer, working on medical instruments and things like that. So it's a nice sort of intersection. So yeah, as Emily was saying, you don't need to take a linear career path into tech. So yeah, that's how I did it.
Very cool. I like that you said that you did your master's while working. So does that mean you did it kind of part-time over a couple of years?
Yeah, so it took 2 years, and yeah, so it's part-time. So a lot of hard work in the evening. So I'd be doing my marketing job by day and then coding by night. But yeah, definitely well worth it. So there's a lot of options for how you can learn to code and do software.
Great. And you mentioned that you're an embedded software engineer. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like this is when you think of software, it's sort of, you know, like apps and, you know, websites and things. So embedded software is basically a lot lower level. So front end is basically, you know, websites and apps, as I was saying, but embedded is sort of a lot lower level. So if you think of robotics, the code used to control actual physical elements. So you know, like rotaries or gears or torques, that's written in a specific language called C. So it's basically to control, say, different parts of a medical instrument or anything robotic or physical. It's a very lower level sort of language to control physical components and actually make them move and do things. So yeah.
Very cool. Love that. Thank you. Helen, what was your route into tech?
Oh, that is really cool. Learning a lot already. Yeah, so my route was also a little bit squiggly. I did a physics degree after my A-levels, and then went on. I was really interested in physics, obviously, and in astronomy in particular. So I decided to do a PhD in that, which is basically you're kind of studying along, you sort of training to be a researcher essentially in astronomy. So I got to do loads of exciting things, traveled to different parts of the world to use some of the most massive telescopes, and use all sorts of interesting data. But after I finished my PhD, that took about 3-4 years. And then after that, I just fancied a bit of a change, and I switched industry. So even though I've been coding, I had to learn some new coding languages, and like learn some new skills in data science, how I could apply that coding in a different way. And then got a job as a junior data scientist at Co-op, and I've just kind of worked my way up the ladder basically since I got there 5 years ago.
Very cool. And how would you describe data science as a career?
Yeah, so good question. It's basically using like maths, statistics, and coding to help Co-op make smarter decisions, essentially. So part of it is analyzing the data to understand what it means and kind of make sense of it and find patterns in the data. And then another part of it is trying to make predictions about the future and understand what might happen next. So an example is like if we know that a customer has bought bread and milk and a load of chocolate, they're trying to predict like what their next item might be or what are the kind of products that they might be interested in from Co-op.
Very cool. So is that like where you get the sort of offers for things in supermarkets? That's obviously based on data of what you've bought previously.
Yeah, so that's exactly the bit that I'm working on at the moment is I'm part of the team who build the offers. Well, I don't build the app itself, but the offers behind the app. So I kind of decide when you open up your Co-op app if you're going to get an offer for loads of chocolate or if you're going to get crisps or if you're going to get a really good Ben & Jerry's offer or something. That's all down to my sort of algorithms in the background.
Yes, you're a good person
Hopefully
to know
making
then,
people
Helen.
happy.
Great, thank you. Dara, how about you? What's been your route into tech?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So I studied a course called Multimedia Technology and Design, a bit of a mouthful, at University of Kent, and it was very dynamic. So we did courses like photography, animation, film, graphic design, and then there was a bit of web design. So it was definitely leaning more on the media side than the technical side. And as part of the web design course, we had to build a one-page personal website on some of our favorite things. So I did that. I didn't enjoy coding because it was basic HTML and CSS. I didn't enjoy it at all. But after I graduated, for some reason, I found that I went back to the website and was basically tweaking the code, playing around with it, trying to change things, improve it. And that's kind of how I ended up doing web design. And so I kind of just started to teach myself how to code, and then I started to build small websites for small companies, and some people would see it, they would like it, and then I started freelancing from there. And fast forward a year later, I got my first job in tech.
Nice. Your degree sounds really interesting. Like, it's very cool that you got to study so many different kind of creative areas. It sounds like a really good way to figure out, like, if you're interested in sort of creative jobs but don't know what specifically you want to do, it's quite a good way to try out different things. And obviously working for Spotify, it's a very well-known company. How have you found? You said you've been there for about a year. How are you finding working at Spotify?
Yes, it's been super exciting. So previously I worked in my entire career, I've always worked in fintech. So my first job was actually at a bank where I was working in the technology department. And then after that, I worked at a crypto company for a year and then Spotify. So I've always been working in finance. And so moving from that to Spotify, it's a very different experience. But I think I love it. I get to work with really creative people, and the work culture is probably my favorite thing about working there. So it's definitely a good experience so far.
Nice. We'll talk more about work culture in a little bit, actually. But as you were talking about fintech and working for banks, we'll go to Emily next. What's been your route into tech?
I really enjoyed Helen's use of the word squiggly. I think my career would also definitely be described as squiggly. So I was one of those students at school who was sort of good enough at everything, but didn't really have anything that they were really good or really passionate about, which made choosing things like A-levels and degrees really, really challenging. So I was quite arty, and I was also quite like mathsy. So I ended up doing like maths, geography, psychology and art for my A-levels. And ended up taking a degree in town planning, which was like applied geography. So it's like looking at places and why places are the way they are and why people interact with it, which I really, really enjoyed. I got really ill at the end of my 4th year, so I didn't actually graduate on time, but I didn't want to spend another year at uni. So I ended up sort of falling into an internship in the City of London in finance and sort of finishing my degree alongside that. But I just sort of taken this job because it was like an admin job and it sounded quite interesting. And I was like, I get to live in London and earn money. And I wasn't really passionate about finance, which is funny because I'm now back in finance. So after a couple of years, I ended up training as a teacher and taught geography in a secondary school in London for 4 years and loved it. And then the pandemic hit and it changed everything. And it was becoming quite a hard job. And I felt like I wanted to leave London. And in my role, I've been head of careers at my school. So I was running things like the field trips to universities that some of you might have been on. I was organising work experience. And I was getting a lot of tech companies coming into school and running workshops. We're a school very close to Heathrow, so lots of business connections, which was really, really great. As I was talking to all these people running these tech workshops, and I was seeing people making flying superheroes in an hour and a half and stuff. And I was like, this is really cool. So I did some research and I found this company called, or I think it's a charity or social enterprise, I'm not sure, should probably check it out. It's called Co-First Girls. And they do training lessons for girls to learn how to tech for free in the evenings. And you can sign up to like an 8-week course. It's 2 hours a week and they will teach you very basic coding skills. I was like, I'll give this a go and see how I find it. And ended up absolutely loving it. So they do like a thing called a CFG degree, which is like an evening course. So it's 4 nights a week and you do it for 16 weeks and you train more in depth into tech. And there's a job offer at the end of it. And obviously leaving your job is quite a scary thing. So having like a job offer at the end of it makes it much more achievable. So I was like, this is great. So I applied to that. Got a place sponsored by Natwest and ended up doing the software engineering route. So I learned Python for 16 weeks. And then I did a DevOps and cloud like masters, which was essentially a 4-week top up. Again, still in the evenings. So all of this was alongside sort of full-time working and things. And then I started with Natwest in the DevOps and cloud team in January, which was really exciting. So it's quite a long explanation, but there's a lot.
I think so far you've got the squiggliest. I would say if we're voting for squiggliest, I think you're winning. But it's really interesting to hear all the different ways that you've kind of, each of you has kind of got interested in tech. I've got one more question for you just before we go on to Addy, which has now completely gone out of my head. It's really annoying. No, I've remembered DevOps. Would you be able to briefly explain what that means? Because I imagine lots of people on the call probably haven't heard that term before.
Yeah, of course. So DevOps is sort of moving away from your traditional coding and working. So essentially what's happened is that all your technology was traditionally stored on data centers, which are like physical centers. You might have seen them in like TV shows like 24 and stuff, where there's like massive computers that things are plugged into. And if they break, everything breaks and it's a disaster. And in recent years, being many tens of years, but more recently than computers have been going, we started moving things onto the cloud. And you've probably heard of the cloud with things like iCloud, Google Drive, and it's all about putting your data on there and running things from the cloud. So we use things like AWS, which you might not have heard of, but you've probably heard of Amazon, and they stand for Amazon Web Services. Google's got a version, Microsoft's got a version called Azure. And these all host things on the cloud. So it's a different way of coding. I still code. I use a language called Ansible, which is Python adjacent. So we still do coding, but we are all about putting the data on the cloud. And we do a thing called containerization, where we sort of essentially make it into a small block and put it on the cloud, which means that it can be accessed as and when it's required. So it's quite new. It's quite up and coming. Or it's still, it's going to be up and coming for a while. It's a very advancing technology. I think it's really exciting, but it does mean that I'm not doing fun things like designing websites like Dara is. But yeah, it's good. I enjoy it.
Nice, thank you. And Addy, how about you? What's been your route into tech?
Thank you. So mine's not squiggly, really, but it's very similar to Emily, actually. It's funny that. So at secondary school, I was quite artsy, but I was really good at maths. So everyone was like, just do maths, physics, chemistry. I was like, no, I want to do art. So I did maths, physics, chemistry, and art. Absolutely tanked chemistry because that's a really difficult A level. So I just ended up with maths, physics, and art. Then I went to university to do mathematics with oceanography, in all honesty, because I wanted to go to a red brick university, but I didn't have the grades, but I could get in doing with oceanography, but that was really cool. Then unfortunately in my second year I had to take some time out, so then I went back home for a year. Then I ended up getting a job at Monzo Bank in their customer operations. So anybody that basically went on their app and spoke to Monzo, I could have been there or given us a call. Then I went into complaints at Monzo Bank, which was actually really interesting. Then I left there to go into complaints in the council for parking charges, which was again really interesting, but some very angry people there, but I loved it. And then I decided that I should really get on with my degree because I'd already taken 2 years out. So whilst working, I went to Lincoln University because I'd moved home from where I started uni. So I just did pure maths at Lincoln University. And then it came to my final project, and I just wanted maths, just wanted to stay in academia, because it's all the only career I'd ever looked at apart from investment banking, which I no longer wanted to go into. And then my final year project, I was expecting group theory. For some reason got stuck with mathematics of image processing and recognition. I was like, what is this? I've never coded in my life. It was setting me up for failure. I was fuming. So decided I had to do something about it and found Code First Girls offering a free course. So I did their Introduction to Python and Introduction to SQL. Thankfully, did get a first and managed to pass my project. But then I was like, what now? So I'd had a taste for coding. I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. So this was only last year. So about May last year, I was like, well, I think I'll get a job rather than staying in academia. Found a consultancy company called Sparta Global. And what they do is they have like career pathways for most tech streams. So you can do like data science, they do software development, all sorts of things. And they take you on with no experience and they train you up and then they ship you out to clients. So I just happened to, I wanted a job quick, and the one available was Java STEP. So I just went on the Java STEP course, which is software development engineering testing. So doing software development, but from a testing point of view. And then alongside that, so I was doing that during the day. I did the Code First Girls CFG degree in the evening because I still wanted to do data at that point. So I did the data pathway. Then it came to the end of my training with Sparta Global and the end of my CFG degree. Sparta Global put me with land registry, but I trained up in Java and backend, and they stuck me in a Ruby front-end testing environment. I was like, well, this is useless. So I did a few manual tests over about 3 months, and I didn't really enjoy that. The CFG job that I got offered at the end had changed a little bit from what I was expecting. So I didn't really want that. So then I stuck myself on a few websites. There's one called Hacker Job, where you just put your name and your CV and you do some coding exercises, and then companies come to you. And one company called Currencycloud came and offered me more than I would be expecting for my experience. So I was like, oh, I'll give it a go. And I joined them in September last year. And yes, that's my job as QA engineer.
Amazing. And can you just briefly explain what sort of QA or quality assurance engineering actually means?
Of course, yeah, it varies from place to place, but essentially it's just writing code to test code. So you're quite involved with the developers. So sometimes I pick up some development tickets, but you're also quite involved with the business side of things. So the business side of things, we're saying like, we want a product that does X, Y, Z. The developers will do X, Y, Z. I write code to ensure they have done X, Y, Z.
Perfect. Well, that leads us on quite well into, we'll come back and we'll ask you more questions, but we're going to move on just to a bit of an activity now, just to mix things up a bit, which is the debugging activity. So quick question for all of you. How much of your time would you say that you spend debugging code that you've written? Is it something that you have to do quite often? No shame?
Quite a lot of the time, yeah.
A lot of the time.
That's good. That's good to know. This is what I thought. So that's why I thought it was quite a good exercise. So you can keep your cameras on if you want to, or you can turn them off. And we'll be doing this for the next sort of 15-20 minutes, I think, and then we'll come back to you with some more Q&A. So up to you. I'm just going to share my slides again. they'll probably go back to the beginning because they tend to do that, which is a bit annoying. Oh no, they stayed where they were. That's great. Okay, so students on the call, debugging exercise. So very quickly, just to explain kind of what that means. In computer science, a bug is an unexpected problem with software or hardware. In coding, it's an error. So it's the same kind of thing. It's an unexpected problem coming up. You've written some code, you're expecting something to happen and it's not happening. You might sometimes get an error message. Often though, the error message won't tell you what's wrong, which is a bit frustrating. So debugging is the process of finding and removing those errors so that the code works as expected. Quick question actually for our panelists. Do any of you know who this is? I always find this very interesting. I'm going to take
the silence says no.
Yeah. Okay, so that's great. I can teach you about a woman pioneer of computer science then. So this is Grace Hopper. You might recognise the name now, you maybe didn't recognise her face. But she is considered one of the first computer programmers, a woman. Very important. She graduated in like the 1930s in the US, and I'm telling you about her now because in 1947 she was working at Harvard University, a very famous university that you've probably all heard of, kind of seen in TVs and TV programs and films. And her team was working on a computer, obviously very different from the computers we work with today. And it kept throwing back errors. It wasn't doing what it was meant to be doing. So they took it apart to try and work out what was going wrong. And they found a moth, a live moth in the computer. So a literal bug that was kind of messing with the electrics in the computer and causing it to not work properly. So that is now kind of famous as the first ever computer bug, which was a real bug. And ever since then, that terminology has been used for things that mess with computers and mean that they don't work. So I thought it was just quite a fun story for you to explain where that terminology comes from. And also a woman pioneer of computer programming, which probably not many people have heard of her, but she's pretty cool. You can look into her if you want to know more. So to explain what we're going to be doing next. Hopefully you've all got paper with you because you might want to use it you might be able to do this without paper, but I think it'll be quite hard. So it'll be helpful if you have got paper and pencils or pens. Women on the panel, if you want to have a go at this, you're very welcome to. But obviously it's aimed at the students. I did test it with someone yesterday and they did it worryingly quickly. So I've tried to make it a bit harder. We'll see how this goes. Anyway. You're going to be given, I'm going to show you on the screen a few different small mazes with instructions that are incorrect. So the goal is to get from the start square, it all makes sense when you see one in a minute, to the finish square and pick up any stars on the way. So you've got to be in the same square as the star before you pick it up. That's important. And basically, you need to have a look at the instructions that I've told you are wrong, figure out what's wrong, and then write the correct version. So this will all make sense in a minute if it doesn't already. Okay, the rules are that only these instructions are allowed and they must be written exactly like this. And I'm sure the panelists will have experience of this, of where in coding, everything has to be exactly right. So there can be like the tiniest little spelling mistake, or you might have put like a full stop somewhere where there shouldn't be one or something, and that can mean that the whole thing doesn't work. So this is really important. So on your paper with your pencils or pens, I would recommend writing these down because I'm only going to show them now. And the next few slides, you're going to need to remember these to be able to work out what's not quite right. So write these down exactly as they are. Make sure you've got the capital letters in there. Where it says repeat 1 to 5 times, you wouldn't actually have the brackets. It's just explaining that that's the only numbers that you're allowed. So you could only repeat 1 time, which I'm not sure why you do that, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, or 5 times. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to get these written down. Make sure you've got them in front of you so that when you see the instructions coming up, you can compare and try and figure out which ones aren't quite right. Okay, it's hard to know whether I've given you enough time or not, so I'm going to assume that you've written them down. If you haven't, someone call out and tell me that you haven't, and I'll give you a bit longer, or we can come back to them. But I'm going to assume that hopefully you've got them. Okay. So next thing I want you to do is to check that you've got them down right and that you understand what you're doing. So which of these instructions are correct, and can you correct the incorrect ones? Bit of a mouthful, but you've got 12, I think, instructions there. I'll give you a clue. Not many of them are right. There are more that are wrong than that are right. So this is where your list that you've just written down is very handy, because you're going to be comparing them. And this is, we've not got into the maze yet, but this is just to check that you're understanding what you're doing and you can figure out which ones are right, which ones are wrong. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to figure that out. I'll give you 3 minutes, actually. I think at least 3 minutes. You might need longer. Let me put a timer on so that I don't give you too long or not long enough. Yeah, so I'll give you 3 minutes. So I mean, you might want to write them down and have a look at them, or you might be able to just immediately write down what you think the correct one is. So yeah, which of these are right and match what you wrote down before, and which of these are not right, and if they're not right, what should they be instead? How can you make them right? And I'll be back in 2.5 minutes to see if you've done it or if you need a bit more time. Okay, you've had 3 minutes. Is that long enough? Do you need longer? Let me know in the chat if you'd like to have a little bit longer. I'll give you a little bit of time in case any teachers want to write. Please give us more time. Otherwise, we'll move on. I'm going to give you the answers anyway. So actually, if you haven't finished, it doesn't really matter as long as you've had a go at a few of them. Okay, one school's saying that they're done, so I'm gonna take that to mean that we carry on. No need to type the answers in the chat. I'm going to let you know the answers now. So it's just for students can kind of mark their own work, and it's just to help you see whether you missed anything or whether you managed to notice all of the errors. So, okay, here we go. So now you can see only 4 out of 12 were right. So I said less than half were right. So the ones that were right were D, repeat 3 times, and then the colon, that's what that's called, I think. G, move up, H, stop, repeat, and L, move down. They were all correct. The rest of them are wrong. Most of them hopefully are obvious why they're wrong. A couple that might not be obvious. C is maybe a bit of a mean one. That is because, well, we'll find out in a second what's wrong actually. E, repeat 10 times, appears to be written correctly. It is written correctly. However, in the rules, you might remember that we said it could only be between 1 and 5. So it's just because it's 10, that wouldn't be allowed. It wouldn't work. The other ones hopefully are quite obvious. So I'm just going to share next screen what the correct answers would have been for those ones that were wrong. So hopefully you got that right, or you were close to that and you knew that it was those 4 that were right. You might have missed a couple of the ones that were wrong. Okay, so turn right should be move right. We've used move for all of the instructions. Move forwards doesn't exist. It would be move up or move down. I kind of thought forward maybe would be up. C, pick up star, this one I think was the meanest, is just the U and the S are lowercase, which is not even that easy to tell really in this font. So that was quite mean. So if you thought that one was right, there's no shame in that. However, these are the kinds of small errors that can be in your code or another person's code that can mean that it doesn't work. So it shows you do have to be quite good at kind of picking up small things. D was correct. E, like I said, it just would need to be between 1 and 5, so it can't be 10 times. F, move to the left, should just be move left. G was right, H was right. I, pick up stars with an S, that wasn't an instruction, it should just be pick up star. And actually on all the mazes that I show you, there's only 1 star anyway. J, drop star, there's no drop star, that's not an instruction that we gave. And that's not part of the game, there's no dropping of stars, so it should pick up star is the only instruction that should have star in it. K, move to goal, we didn't give any goal in the instructions, so the only move instruction should be up, down, left or right, and then L was correct. So hopefully that wasn't too difficult. Hopefully you managed to find most of those. Hopefully you kind of enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed it when I was writing this and practicing it. So hopefully you quite enjoyed kind of looking and figuring out what it should be instead of what it was. So maze 1, you've got 3 mazes. I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes on this first one because I think this one's quite quick. So it's up to you whether you want to draw it or whether you just want to look at it on the screen, whether you want to write down the current instructions, or you could even kind of ignore them and figure out what you think they should be and then compare. It's up to you. So just a reminder, you're starting in that start square, finishing in the finish square, and in between. So you want to get from start to the square that the star's in, pick up the star, and then move to the square that the finish flag is in. And at the moment that's not quite happening. The star's not getting picked up and you're not ending up in that A1 where the finish flag is. You're ending up somewhere else. So hopefully that helps you to figure out what might be wrong here. So I'll give you a clue in that 2 out of 5 instructions are wrong somehow and need to be corrected. So I'm only going to give you 2 minutes for this because I think this one's fairly straightforward, and then I'll give you the answers and then we'll go on to the next one. So I'll be back in 2 minutes. You might not have noticed, but I somehow left the call then by accident. I told you that I'm not the biggest fan of Teams, even though I use it every day in my job. So that's fun. So you've had your 2 minutes on that maze. Again, in the chat, like if you feel like you really need more time, let me know. But I don't want to spend too long on this because I really want to get back to the Q&A and get more questions asked to our panel. So I've lost my share screen, so let me just quickly do that again. Here we go. Oh, yeah, I knew that would happen at some point. It would go back to the beginning. So this was your maze. These were the incorrect, the wrong code or the wrong instructions. So let's now have a look. I mentioned that 2 of them were wrong. So hopefully this didn't take you long. The third one, similar to in the previous exercise, pick up stars. It had an S on it. It should just be pick up star. And then at the bottom, it was move right, which was you were ending up, you might have noticed, in C1 instead of A1 because you're going up and right and you needed to go up and left. So it just needed to be move left instead of move right. Hopefully that was fairly straightforward. Hopefully you enjoyed that. We've got a couple more now that are a little bit more complicated. So maze number 2. A little bit longer, a few more instructions. I can't remember how many things there are wrong with this. I think 3. Yeah, is that right? Yes, I'm pretty sure 3 of the instructions are wrong, if that helps. So again, you're starting in that start square. You want to get to the star first. That's really important. Pick up the star and then get to the finish. So have a think about what's going wrong at the moment, what's happening at the moment with that code and what should be happening and what do you need to change to get it to be right. So again, I'm going to give you 2 minutes and I'll be back to share the answers with you. Okay, I'm coming back a tiny bit early just because I don't want to end up with hardly any time for the Q&A. So hopefully you managed to do that one. Do say in the chat if you really desperately need more time. But it's more for you to have a go. So if you haven't quite finished, it's fine. And I'm going to share the answer now. So here we go. So there were 3 things that were wrong. In the initial instructions, it was going up and right. So it was going to the finish and then to the star and then coming back. Or trying to come back. But we didn't want to get to the finish before. That's why I made it very clear you want to get to the star first. So instead of going up, right, you want to go up, up, right, right. So we needed 2 move right to be move up and 3 move up to be move right. So kind of swapping those around. And then the other thing that was wrong was just the lowercase d. So this was a little bit mean, but we had an example of it in the earlier exercise. So hopefully you were looking out for things like not having capitals. Someone was a little bit harder. So this third one is the hardest yet, and we're going to try and do it quickly so we can get back to asking questions. So this introduces something called loops, which are used quite a lot in code, and it's effectively when you want something to be done multiple times, rather than having to write the same thing over and over and over again, you can just say that you want to repeat it a certain number of times and then say what the thing is that you want to repeat and then kind of close it off. So that's where we've got that stop repeat So if you were writing this into a computer, obviously this isn't actually code, but if you were writing something like this, it would know when it should stop and then start a new instruction. So have a look at this. I think there are 5 things wrong in this one. I was a bit mean with this one. So yeah, have a look very closely and try and see if you can figure out what are those 5 things that are not quite right at the moment. Is it 5 things? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 5 things. And it's the same maze as before, actually. So again, just make sure that you're getting to the star first and then to the finish flag. I'm going to give you 2 minutes again. Okay, that one, oh, I'm getting strange light on me, sorry. That one was a bit harder, probably, hopefully it wasn't too easy. I'm just going to go through the answers now so that you know. So yeah, I mentioned there were 5 things that were wrong, so hopefully you were looking out for them all. So the first one's a bit obvious. It says repeat 1 time, but you wanted to repeat 2 times. Again, number 4, it says 3 times. That would take you off the maze, so you only want it to repeat twice. The number 5, move right, was a mean one. It was just that the R was lowercase and it should have been a capital, so you might have missed that one. Number 7 was really mean. I put a comma in there just at the end, so you might not have noticed it, but that would mean in code that it wouldn't work, and that can happen quite a lot. Like I think I mentioned earlier, like you might accidentally put a full stop or a comma or something where there shouldn't be one, and then the computer just can't read what you're asking it to do because it doesn't know what that is in the wrong place. And then number 8, go left. Hopefully that one was a bit more obvious because we've been using move all the time, so it should have been move left. And then if you were to do the new version, you should get exactly what you want. So move to the star, pick up the star, get to the finish, which was what we were trying to do. So hopefully you enjoyed that. We've got just over 10 minutes left, so I want to go back to our panel now as quickly as possible. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen if I can figure out how to do that. The light's gone really strange in here, sorry. Got funny blinds. So panelists, if you can put your cameras back on, you should all still be spotlighted, hopefully. And I'm just going to ask you a few more questions. Thank you. So one thing that I just wanted to say quickly, because I didn't mention it before, but I think it's important, is students on the call, you might have noticed that when we were doing the Q&A before, all 5 women here did mention that they had done degrees, but none of them have done them in computer science. So Penny obviously did do a master's in computer science, but her original degree wasn't in computer science, and no one else. Dara's was kind of slightly related, but it was something different. And then the other 3 did other math, there's still kind of maths and science, which is interesting, actually. That's not always the case. I studied languages at university, so I studied Spanish and Italian. because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I liked learning languages and thought doing a year abroad would be really fun, and it was. So I'm glad I did it, even though I don't use them in work now. They're useful life skills. But I know loads of people in tech who've done all different kinds of degrees, so what you study doesn't really matter. And the other point to make is you don't even need to have a degree, and that's becoming more common now. So you'll find probably there are lots of people currently working in tech. It's probably more common to have a degree, just because at our age, when we were at school, I mean, I'm probably older than all of you, but when we were all at school, that was kind of the standard, is sort of you finish school, what do you do next? You go to university. If nothing else, it gives you a bit more time to kind of figure out what you want to do for work. However, things are changing. Apprenticeships are becoming much more common. Degree apprenticeships as well, and they're all on UCAS now, so some of you might have heard UCAS, might be using it already. It's kind of the system that you use to apply for university. That apprenticeships are on there now as well. It used to just have universities, but now it's got apprenticeships too. With an apprenticeship, you're working and earning money right from the beginning. With a degree apprenticeship, you also get a degree. So I think it takes slightly longer to get the degree. It might take like 4 or 5 years rather than 3. But you're also working at the same time, and you're earning money as opposed to sort of spending money, getting loans for university. So they're worth thinking about as well. There's also boot camps. There's lots of organisations that run boot camps. So one of our partners, Makers, they run, I think it's a 16-week boot camp. And we have scholarships for those. You just have to be 18. They also organise apprenticeships. And a couple of the women did mention Code First Girls. So they are a social enterprise similar to us. And they have lots of online courses, and they also have things like they mentioned, they call it a degree, where you sort of get a job at the end of it, which is very cool. And they're becoming quite a common route for women to get into tech. Their courses are also for 18 and over. But for any of you who are due to finish school soon, if you're not keen on going to university, but you really want to get some tech skills, or even if you are, but you'd like to do something like that in the evening just to get those skills, it's worth having a look at. They run some events as well that are really fun, so have a look at Code First Girls. Anyway, shush, questions. I'm talking too much. So I'm really keen to hear from you. I mentioned I'm keen to know about your working culture. Oh, Addie's put in the chat they're starting to do some for 16 plus. That's great. That's really good news. So yeah, so anyone who's almost 16 or 16 and over, it's worth having a look at them too. That's great. Yeah, working culture. So one of the questions that we had come up was kind of, what does your normal day look like? And in particular, your working location. So do you tend to be in an office? Do you tend to be at home? Do you kind of move around? So if we start with Helen for that one. Sorry,
Yeah,
it's always scary to go first.
As you can see, I'm not in an office, so I work from home completely full time at the moment. Like you said earlier, there's sometimes events that you can go into the office for, like big group things. But Co-op is sort of a hybrid organisation now, and there's people who work fully remotely like me. There are people who go into the office maybe like 3 or 4 times a week. It just really varies depending on what role you've got and what your sort of personal preferences in the team that you work in. But yeah, my working week, is quite mixed. I think that's what I really like about my role, is that sometimes I'm working on, coding, coming up with some new algorithms, doing lots of debugging. Like yesterday, I was full on stuck into debugging and like banging my head against the wall trying to get something to work. It was like less fun. Sometimes it's thinking about strategy and having meetings with lots of exciting people who work in like the digital team, the membership team, marketing, like various people from around Co-op, and just trying to figure out what my role is in making something happen. And then yeah, other times like communicating results to different stakeholders as well. So I might go away and code up some sort of we run a lot of tests. So something that might happen, you might say, oh, I want to see what happens if we give 50% of people purple background on their app or something like that. Would be a digital test, and data science equivalents of those tests are like slightly different because they're a little bit more nerdy and a little bit more behind the scenes. But we'd run some sort of test like that, and then I'd be analysing the results and then presenting them back to people, trying to make sense of all the data and all the stats. So yeah, quite varied and lots of different things.
Awesome, thank you. Dara, I'm going to go to you next because you mentioned that you particularly like the culture at Spotify. So it'd be interesting to hear your sort of working pattern, what kind of things you normally do in a day, but also if there are any specific elements, I guess, of culture at Spotify that you'd like to kind of call out.
Yep. So just to answer the first question, my working location is just like Helen, from home. So I work from home and I go into the office maybe once a month or so. And my team is also spread out across Europe, so we really don't have to come to the office. Answering your second question about the culture, yeah, so I think day to day, it's like a typical software engineering, like day to day, where I have a daily stand up with my team and then pick up tickets on the board that I'd like to work on. And then if there are meetings to attend, like team ritual meetings, we do that. But yeah, it's nothing much different from that. And speaking of the culture, I think one thing that I would like to highlight is Spotify has this concept of embeds where you can embed in another team across the company for any specific amount of time. So I'm actually starting one next week, and it's a really interesting way to learn about different parts of the company, but also to widen your skills and just work with a different set of people for a specific amount of time. So I think in that way, like the company encourages a lot of that, and also just generally there's a lot of like they care deeply about your growth and just making sure that you're learning, making sure that you're comfortable. And so I think those are the highlights for me. When I joined, there was obviously like a ton of imposter syndrome, feeling like I had no idea what I was doing and like a ton of self-doubt. But again, because of how welcoming the culture is and how like open people are to help, you never really should be afraid to ask questions because everyone's just like always willing to help you. Yeah, I think those are like my culture highlights at my job.
Amazing, I love that. And I saw lots of nodding along, and my experience of working in tech is it's quite similar in that as an industry, I think it tends to, lots of tech companies anyway, tend to really value learning and development and sort of professional growth, and are very keen for you to have opportunities like you were mentioning where you can kind of sit with other teams and learn what other people are doing, which is really cool. Penny, how about you? What's your sort of working pattern like?
Yeah, so mine's a bit more fluid. I've had a bit of a different experience. So I work at a startup, so there's not necessarily like a big office or a big team to sort of interact with. So I'm sort of mainly at home. I pop into the office sort of every now and then, maybe to pick up stuff and go through things. So because I do embedded software, I actually have like physical hardware. So physical boards and electronics, and I'm plugging speakers into things because I work on Bluetooth and audio. So I'm sure, like, you know, you're familiar if you've got earbuds or something, you know, connecting over Bluetooth to your phone. So I do a lot of that. So yeah, I go in to pick up stuff and, you know, I guess kind of have a similar stand-up situation as well, you know, see what the priority is, what features the customer's wanting. Then I'll sort of come back home with my list, and a lot of my day is just like sort of just get on with it in coding and debugging. But yeah, in my previous role, there was a lot of meetings that, for example, I was working on medical instruments, so like software quality and regulations and sort of things adjacent as well. But yeah, I would say mainly day to day, I'm coding and working with hardware. So it's really fun.
Nice. We're almost at time, so I have a question for the panel. Are you happy to stay on for a little bit longer because we've got a few more questions in the chat? Okay, great. And we are recording this, so if any of the schools do need to drop off, we can share obviously the recording with you later so your students can see these last few questions. So I'm going to move question now, actually, because we've got quite a few in the chat that are coming up that we've heard of before, which is what inspired you to go into IT or tech? So Emily, I'm going to ask you, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but yeah, what encouraged you to move into tech in particular over other industries?
Yeah, it was something that I spent quite a while kind of figuring out. And I think what I really like about tech is the problem solving element. So you can spend hours, if not days, banging your head against a brick wall, looking for something that's broken, and it ends up being a comma's out of place or something. And it's really satisfying when you fix a problem. Like, it's a really satisfying feeling. And there's so many problems out there to fix. And it's so process driven that you really get a sense of accomplishment. I found, like, when I was in teaching, when I was in admin before, I never really had a job that sort of felt complete and you had that wrap up. And you do get that a lot in tech, which I really, really like as like a starter finisher. I was quite worried about like the culture, having moved from a very social job in teaching, like being in front of people all the time, to a job that's quite like hybrid. So I only go into the office 2 days a month. I was worried I'd be quite lonely, but also was quite happy to have the work-life balance. Like I can go to the gym before work, or I can go like during my lunch break and stuff. You know, there's lots of positives, and actually it's amazing how social it can be. It's, you know, everyone's social lives moved online during COVID, and work's kind of kept the same. Like I still have really good relationships with everyone in my team. And we do a thing called pair programming, where like 2 of us work on the same project together, and it's really good for like debugging and moral support and like boosting ideas and stuff. And I think that was something that I didn't necessarily think that I would get out of the job. Like I thought it could be quite insular, but actually it's like one of the things that I really, really enjoy about it now is that I can go into the office and I can have a great day, but I can also work at home and not feel like I've just sat at home all day. I don't know if that necessarily inspired me, but it's definitely a massive perk of like what I've liked out of it. But yeah, I just wanted something that I felt like a sense of achievement doing, and something that I could always learn. Like I was a teacher, I love learning, I love instilling learning in other people, and there's so much to learn. Like you're never going to run out of stuff. Like if you get bored of a language, just learn another language. If you get bored of an area, look at like, you know, moving into a different sector. Like that, it's so varied, it's so different, and you come across a lot. Like there's always more stuff. Like you kind of end up in a rabbit hole of like exciting new areas that you could explore, and I think that's really exciting.
I guess that's the beauty of working in an industry that's kind of constantly evolving, isn't it? Like technology is constantly changing, so you kind of have to be keeping learning, sort of keep up with stuff. Addy, I'm going to ask you a different question just to keep going with the questions in the chat. So what are some of your biggest challenges day to day? It's a mean one, sorry.
No, it's fine. Mine's, I suppose, a little bit niche, I suppose, because it's QA. So again, I write the code to test the code. And one thing that I really struggle with is criteria on a ticket. So a ticket will be written sometimes by a developer who just want to get the work done. So they get told you need to do X, Y, Z. So they write a ticket, which is just saying this is the work that needs to be done. Then it comes over to me and I'm like, this is unclear. I don't know exactly what we need to test. And if you've got 2 developers working on the same ticket, they do different things. And then so refining that criteria within the team, then also because we're back end, so we're so far removed from what a customer sees. Essentially, we want to make sure it's what the customer sees, like the final result is correct. So we will go to the team that handles that. And there's so many things in between, so many middlemen. They're like, well, we don't know. You should know. And it's refining that criteria within the company and within the team. So I think, yeah, criteria is probably the biggest challenge.
Helen, I know you mentioned in the chat you need to leave very soon, so I'm going to ask you the same question. What are your biggest challenges day to day?
That's a tough question as well for the last one. Biggest challenges. I think sometimes it's because of the experimental nature of data science. I think like a couple of other panelists have mentioned, you know, we're learning new things all the time. We're experimenting with a lot of things that are quite cutting edge. So at the moment, it's all about like what we call generative AI. So I don't know if anyone's heard about ChatGPT. You know, you've got these really sophisticated chatbots now, which basically understand all the constructs of like how languages put together, understand like bits of coding, have like basically all of the knowledge from the internet. And like we're just learning about it like now just from scratch. We don't really know much about it, and we're trying to figure out how we can use that in co-op. So it's like absorbing all of that knowledge and experimenting within the data science team, learning about it. And then I think the challenging part is just trying to like convey that to other people who maybe aren't in techie roles, and they want to know, they're in like a commercial team or a marketing team or something. They want to know, how's this useful to us? Like, why do we want to care about it? And why should we invest a bit more money into it? So yeah, when you like hardly know much about it yourself, it's a bit tricky sometimes.
You're on mute, Emily.
Yeah, someone had to do it at some point. Better than it's me. No, I was saying I imagine it's an interesting time to be working in tech in general, but probably particularly in data with the sort of advances in AI, because it could potentially quite massively change how you work. I know there are some people who are a little bit worried that it's going to take their jobs, but I'm hopeful that even if it does, it'll be a long time before we get to that point, and that hopefully it only takes the boring bits and we get to still do the fun, creative stuff. I'm just going to ask a couple more questions because I know we've already overrun, but there's been quite a few in the chat. And Emily, thank you. I've noticed that you've been answering some of them. So there have been some questions, which I know this is a bit sensitive for some people, but there have been some questions around salary in terms of kind of what you earn and what is possible to be earned in the tech industry. So obviously we mentioned before sort of average starting salaries for a software engineer, which there will be some that are much lower, there'll be some that are higher, but that was 45,000, which is a lot of money in case some of you aren't sure, but that's good. You could definitely afford to like live somewhere really nice and have a nice lifestyle. In terms of highest salaries, we had a woman on one of our calls before who is in quite a senior role, not like the top role, but a fairly senior role in a big tech consultancy. So that's a consultancy is an organization that kind of advises other companies on how to do things. So they'll work with other companies, they work with a lot of government departments, kind of helping them to make their tech work better. And she didn't want to tell me her salary, but she said that she's in the top 5%, which I looked up on Wikipedia. You can see what that means. And that means she's earning at least 270,000 a year, which is a lot. Like I can't imagine what she can do on her weekends. So and like I said, she's not even the most senior role. So the amount of money that could be earned through a career in tech, I should say she has been in the tech industry for like more than 20 years. So it's obviously taken her a while to kind of get to that level of seniority. It doesn't take everyone that long, and it depends. Emily, I think, put in the chat, depends on what industry you work in as well. Finance in particular is always given as an example of one where you can earn a lot of money, because finance and tech are both industries that kind of struggle to get people with the skills they need, so they're willing to pay more for people who've got them. And yeah, it depends kind of what level of seniority you get to and things like that, but there's definitely the possibility. I don't know if any of you are willing to share, it doesn't have to be your current salary, but maybe kind of what you started on, or average salaries of like people in your area. Is anyone brave enough to share?
I'm happy to jump in on this, because I do think it's something that's really important that we discuss quite openly. So I am just below the average starting salary. I've only been in job for 6 months. Obviously, I came in as a career changer. If I come in as a graduate, essentially with the same company, I'd have been starting on about 27, I think it is. So having the career change behind me did help. For context, I've been a teacher for 5 years, and I took a £2,000 pay cut to start my job. So my salary in teaching had grown, but I've sort of managed to transition across and sort of keep the same, which was obviously quite nice. What I will say is that it varies a lot, and like things like work-life balance are a really important thing to consider in tech roles as well. So like I work for a bank, so there's quite a lot of inflexibility. I can't leave the UK and do my job, for example. Whereas if you wanted to work for like a startup and wanted to be able to travel, you potentially be on a lower salary, but you could not have to pay rent and sort of, you know, travel and stuff. So there's a lot of benefits to that. And it is a job that the progression is quite high. So your first couple of salaries potentially might be lower. You know, like a lot of my friends have started on sort of 30 to 35k, but within like 2 years, they're sort of topping up, like moving up to sort of the 50k mark. It just getting a couple of years of experience under your belt is really, really valuable. It's valuable in any industry at all, but in tech it's very much, once you know what you're doing, you become really valuable, because the time training in tech is quite long to get sort of really good at what you do. And there's so many areas to specialize in, so the more specialized you become, potentially the more money you're going to earn, just because it's a very niche skill that's in very much demand.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I'm just going to do a couple more questions, so we'll definitely finish by past. I hope that's okay with everyone. Just want to make sure we answer as much as we can. So someone's asking about work-life balance, so kind of number of hours that you work and how that might compare to other industries. I think from my experience, it's fairly similar. I mean, I guess it depends what company you're in, but normally the kind of number of hours you're expected to work per week, it should be pretty much the same as any other kind of office type job. Obviously, it depends on the company you work for. We did an event at Google, and they did admit that some of their senior staff work very long hours, but they said that that's really by choice, and it's because they love their job so much and want to be involved in so many different areas of the business, and actually they like that they get to work those kinds of hours. I don't know if any of you have got any kind of different experience to that. How do you find it works? Penny, I see you've come off mute, so I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I've worked, because I'm a career switcher as well, I've worked in sales and marketing, and that was very much client services where I sort of had to be at my desk at 9 a.m. And, you know, even if the workload is less, you know, you have to be there till 5:30 in case there's emails or something. I'd say having that experience and then going into tech where I can, although it's the same amount of hours, because I think, you know, standard contracts in jobs is like 7.5 hours a day. But I think the flexibility of when you do those hours, like sometimes inspiration hits at 10 p.m. and I can fix a bug or something, or, you know, if it's been a long day of meetings, if you're in the office, because my family works in tech as well, like if they've had a long day of like meetings, you know, you can come home at 3 and you make up the hours. So I think it's that, although it's the same number of hours, the flexibility to work around your life. I feel like having worked in another industry, albeit that was pre-COVID, but yeah, the flexibility to work around your life is something that, yeah, I really appreciate. I don't take that for granted. So yeah.
Addy, I saw you raised your hand. Did you want to add anything?
No, I think Penny covered it all. I was just going to say as well, Fridays, most tech companies or some do let you have either like the afternoon off or something like that. So we've just finished our summer working hours, which was we finished at 12. But we now don't have any meetings in from 12 p.m. on a Friday, which is really nice.
Nice. I can see Dara and Emily have written in the chat. So Emily said she works 35 hours a week and can choose the hours she wants. She can do on-call, but gets paid overtime for that. She works much fewer hours than she's teaching, but she does get much less holiday. So that's got to weigh that up. And Dara said she has 40 hours a week, so pretty similar to other jobs outside the tech industry. And yeah, mine's 40 hours, but again, similar to what you said, I can kind of choose if I want to start a bit later, finish a bit later, or start a bit earlier. If I want to do one day a bit shorter, another day a bit longer to kind of balance it out, then I can. And Emily mentioned lots of companies are now moving to a 4-day week for 8 hours a day, which is very exciting. I'm hoping that's going to become more common. Okay, final questions, and I'm going to go to you first, Dara. What do you love most about working in the tech industry? This is your chance to really inspire the students now to want to follow in your footsteps, so no pressure.
Okay, that's lots of pressure. Let me think about it. I think Emily might have touched on this earlier, but for me, it would just be, again, she said this, but it's the problem solving aspect of it. Like there's always something new to work on. And that could be code related or otherwise. If it's a product that you're working on, you get to kind of think of what kind of features would improve the product, or if it's a coding problem, then you get to debug and figure it out. And you find that a lot of the time you're facing different problems. Sometimes they're similar, but day-to-day, my day-to-day is super dynamic, and I think that would be my favorite part of it. And then the other thing would be just how much I get to learn every day. Like it's hard to feel like an expert because there's always something new and always some new skill to learn and always something to work on and improve. So yeah, it's just that it's a super exciting world because there's always something new going on. Yeah, I hope that was inspiring.
It was inspiring for me. I loved it. Thank you. Penny, should we go to you next? What do you love most about working in tech?
I'd say you can never get bored. So similar to what Dara's saying, there's always something new. So I love science. So I started out in biotech when I first got my first software job, and I was working on a high-speed cell sorter, and now I've moved into audio and Bluetooth. So now I work on, you know, small Bluetooth modules for, you know, streaming audio purposes. So there's so much you can do. Like Emily was saying, you can go into any industry that suits you, or even a consultancy where you can be working on millions of different things at once. So I'd say for me, someone that needs a lot of variety, you'll never get bored, and there's always something fun to do. So yeah.
Love that. Addy, you next. What's your favourite part of working in tech?
Yeah, I'd say also, like, you never get bored. There's always something new. Thankfully, I'm in a team that's always making new services. So we're always like, okay, we're going to use this new technology. We're going to do this, going to do something for the first time in the company, which is really cool. But also, I really like the social aspect of it. So if I'm feeling a bit, just when your mind gets a bit fogged, I'll just ask like someone else on my team, like, anyone want to hop on a call or just have a bit of a social chat. We have like team meetups like once a quarter. I was at a team meetup this week. So yeah, I think so. Never getting bored. There's always new stuff, but also it is quite a social job if you want it to be.
I think that's really important, because I think there's still that lingering stereotype that if you work in tech, and especially if you code, you're going to be on your own all the time, which actually isn't the case. Even working remotely, you spend a lot of the time working with other people, whether it's over calls or face to face, and in kind of group sessions, which is nice. Emily, last but not least, what do you love most?
I think most stuff's kind of been covered, but something that really surprised me about the tech industry is like the wider activity that's going on. Like there's so many things like hackathons that happen. There's so many like tech conferences that you can go to. Like it's a really, really fun place. And as a teacher, like I was so used to sort of doing stuff, I thought moving to a desk job would be quite boring. And actually, like, yeah, I've got involved with this. I do Code First Girls. Like, there's so many opportunities to just get out there and work with new people and inspire new people, encourage people to get into tech, and to hone my tech skills and learn something new. I didn't really think about beforehand, but I just have so much fun and so many freebies. Like, it's great. It's how people work in tech, and they're like, come on, we'll give you like a goodie bag if you come to our event. And you're like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. So yeah, no, it's good fun. But that really surprised me. It's a really, really nice part of sort of the industry in general, and it's becoming a lot more friendly. Like it's a really friendly place, and people are really open to sort of teaching you and encouraging you, particularly being a woman in tech. And there's getting more of us. So hopefully when you guys join, if you join in the future, there'll be even more women. It'll be fantastic.
Awesome, thank you so much. And that's a great note to end on. So thank you everyone who did stay on longer. Anyone who did leave, they're not here anymore, but I can share the recording with them. Thank you especially to the panelists. Really appreciate you taking your time to talk to us all today. My final message to you all is just to remember that Next Tech Girls does organise work experience with lots of different organisations. So if you're 14 or over and you'd like to do something, whether it's in your school holidays or you've got a week coming up where your schools are asked you to do work experience, just go to nexttechgirls.com and there's a link there that says apply for work experience, or you can always email me. I'm just emily@nexttechgirls.com. It's quite easy to remember. If you sign up for our emails, which is at the bottom of our website, it says join the Next Tech Girls community, or just join the community. We've got lots of things coming up in October half term, so there will be work experience placements. There'll also be one-day workshops, some of them in person, some of them online, so there's lots of different things that you can get involved in if you're interested and you want to learn a little bit more and get some fun experience that you can maybe put on your CV as well. That might help you when you're coming to apply for different things further down the line. You can also follow us on social media, so we're on like everything, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Threads, if that's even still a thing, and X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. So yeah, follow us. We share really interesting content on there from lots of women similar to our panel today, kind of talking about their route into tech, what they do day to day, showing days in the life, giving their tips if you want to learn more about their career and maybe see if it's something you'd like to do. So worth having a look at. Thank you all so much for your time today. I will email you all afterwards if you want the recording so I can share it with you. And also we've got a very short survey, which we'd really appreciate as many of you as possible filling in, just to give us your feedback so we know how you found today. And if you've got any suggestions for improvement, we can make the next one even better. So happy National Coding Week. Hope you had fun. Hope you were inspired, and hope to see you at one of our events again, whether it's online or in person. Thank you all so much. And thanks again to our panelists.